three demand-side explanations for China's trade surplus: the tight control of foreign exchange, the long blacklist of prohibited items, and the low household consumption and low disposable income. Of course, the whole country has a trade surplus when every company has a trade surplus. Well, if you have been partying on Red Note in the past few days, you probably won't believe this. But Chinese people don't consume much because they don't have money. I'm serious. Okay, I promised to talk about why China is able to accumulate a huge amount of trade surplus. I know some panda huggers out there would be like, it's simple because China is good at making stuff. No, it's not that simple. First of all, I don't believe any nation is just inherently good at making stuff. Some countries may happen to have some endowments at some point. Let's say capital or labor or natural resources or technology or port access or whatever. But you can't just say a country is good at making things for no reason. That's like low-key racist, honestly. But a more important point is that even if a country is good at making things, it doesn't necessarily imply trade surplus. For example, the United States has been having a trade deficit for 60 years in a row. Does it mean Americans are exceptionally dumb? Well, as far as I like to roast you guys, I don't think that's the case. Even if a country is productive, it can still have a trade deficit because people can still use the money they earn to buy things around the world. Especially since the US dollar is so popular, people around the world are totally happy to supply Americans with a shit ton of products just to hoard some green paper. So having a trade deficit doesn't mean you're losing money, okay? Trump is always like, are we losing money to all these countries? No, sir. It's like if you are a barber and your neighbor is a restaurant owner, and if you spend more money in his restaurant than he spends in your barbershop, it doesn't mean you're losing money to him. It's just you happen to consume more of his products than he consumes yours. It's totally natural. So having some trade surplus or deficit is totally normal. But China is a curious case because its trade surplus is way too big and way too consistent. Like if you look at the record, their exports are always like 20% more than their imports. How is that possible? I mean, it's normal for oil economies like Saudi Arabia or Russia because they just dig stuff up and sell them. But for a big and diverse economy, this is strange to say the least. It doesn't just require productivity, but also requires extreme self-constraint in spending money. I know people like to attribute it to cultural reasons, like Chinese people just don't like to buy foreign stuff. Well, I don't have the data in consumer behavior or consumer psychology or something like that, but I'm pretty sure based on my personal experience, that's not the case. The Chinese folks I know are totally okay with foreign products. And very often they try to buy them but couldn't find them in the market. So what is going on? The first reason, which is also the most unique feature of China's trade policy, is the foreign exchange control. As far as I know, China is the only country that strictly limits capital outflow despite a good economy. There are some countries who do it occasionally, but mostly when they are in trouble. China, however, restricts the flow of money consistently. An individual is not allowed to buy more than $50,000 worth of foreign currency each year. So those rich Chinese kids you see driving the sports cars mostly got their money out through the black market. But of course, if you're really rich, you don't even need the black market. You can just start a exporting business and instead of sending out money, you send out products and sell those products in the foreign market in order to get your foreign currency, which is totally legal. So that's the policy about individuals. So what about companies that need to import stuff? Well, it's very hard for them to get foreign exchange without a lengthy approval process. Most private companies simply won't get approved. So the most common way for them to import anything is to first export something and then use the foreign currency they earn to buy the foreign products. That means almost every private company involved in foreign trade probably has a trade surplus because they have to first sell things before they can buy. Imagine that. Of course, the whole country has a trade surplus when every company has a trade surplus. So what if I'm just a corner store that doesn't have any capacity for exporting business? Well, in that case, you just won't be able to import anything. You can only buy things from other Chinese companies. Honestly, I don't know any other country that does business that way. This is totally unique. But is it a good thing or bad thing? Well, be patient, I'll come back to that. The second huge factor for China's trade surplus is a long blacklist of items that are simply forbidden. It doesn't matter how much tariffs you're willing to pay for them, you're just not allowed to import them, period. And most of these things happen to be what the United States is specialized in making. Let's say news services like TV channels, newspapers and news websites, and magazines, and social media, search engines, streaming services, like file sharing services like Dropbox. Basically, anything that facilitates the flow of information has to be made in China. Foreign books and movies and video games are sort of allowed, but they have to be approved case by case. So the number of them in the Chinese market is pretty small. On the surface, this is just some old-fashioned censorship, right? But it's also a kind of a de facto trade protectionism, because by banning those huge platforms like Google and Facebook, you're not only banning the content, but you're also banning the e-commerce associated with the content. That's a lot of potential business lost for foreign sellers. And of course, the domestic platforms like WeChat, Taobao, and Xiaohongshu greatly benefited from that protection. But then there's a third factor. The Chinese households simply consume very little, not just foreign products, but any products. These are the household consumptions as a percentage of GDP in the 10 largest economies. Look at this. China is way below the normal level. And it's not about culture, guys, because none of China's neighbors consumes this little. Well, if you have been partying on Red Note in the past few days, you probably won't believe this. But Chinese people don't consume much because they don't have money. I'm serious. Chinese people, especially those in small towns and rural areas, simply have very low disposable income. Sorry for crushing your fantasy, but it's true. The benefit from China's economic growth is simply distributed extremely unevenly. Those people who are most visible on the internet happen to be those who got lucky. And those who complain a lot already lost their accounts a long time ago. You didn't even have a chance to see them. This is called sampling bias. In this case, the people you sample from happen to be the people who you are allowed to sample from. So why are people's disposable income so low? Well, it's because the fruit of economic growth mostly went to the most connected part of the population. Occasionally, the Communist Party would purge some suckers and drag them on TV, and you will see their entire walls were filled with cash. Money just comes so easy for them if they control the access to land or certain licenses or certain resources. They can't help. Money just keeps coming. Some of them just buy dozens of houses and leave them empty. By the way, that's partly why China doesn't want the yuan to become international. Because if these people decided to run with their money, China's housing bubble would collapse overnight. One of my videos on this topic was actually my most viewed TikTok ever. Just scroll back 2 years and you'll find it. I made it when Putin said he was gonna help the Chinese yuan to replace the dollar. I was like, good luck with that. Because China won't let it happen. They don't want money to leave. Another reason that affects China's disposable income is the absolutely abysmal labor rights. Yep, you heard it right. The independent unions, not allowed. Collective bargaining, not allowed. Strikes, not allowed. Despite what Xiaohongshu told you, the communists are not very friendly to blue-collar workers. Okay? If you really think about it, the communist parties are really just capitalists, but in a much larger scale. Okay, so 3 demand-side explanations for China's trade surplus. The tight control of foreign exchange, the long blacklist of prohibited items, and the low household consumption and low disposable income. So what does it mean? While some countries' trade surplus is just, normal laissez-faire market behavior, but China's is not. It is a result of iron fist government intervention. So is it a good thing or bad thing? Well, in the short run, it definitely stimulates growth because people have to keep making stuff to sell them, not just to domestic market, but to foreign market. And instead of spending their earnings, the money is saved into US Treasury bond or other kinds of investment. So of course, it helps the growth rate. But like any trade barrier, there are 2 long-term problems. Firstly, of course, they hurt the domestic consumers. So regardless of the high growth rate, Chinese people don't really have money to enjoy life, to buy the stuff they want, especially the foreign stuff. And of course, it also hurts the global economy because the products in other countries fail to reach that 1 billion consumers who may otherwise need those products. I'm not just talking about the rich countries' products, but also those from, say, India, Vietnam, Nigeria, or the entire global south. Under the foreign exchange control, when a company finally gets its hand on some hard-earned foreign exchange, normally they have to prioritize importing essential stuff from the US, Japan, and Europe, but rarely from poor countries. And that's really an unfortunate obstacle for a global economy. So yeah, even though I'm from China, I would be totally happy if Uncle Sam could do something to force open China's market. It'll be good for China and it'll be good for everyone else. However, your boy Donald somehow decides to prioritize sanctioning Canada and Mexico, and as a result, giving China an even larger market share without even opening its own market. I don't know what to say. So good job, guys. You chose this. I'm happy that you guys will finally learn the lesson the hard way when you buy groceries. There are some lessons in this world you just won't learn without being fucked over a few times.